Another clip. Another one. Until they can't.
You hear it in the morning. You see it through the window. You pass it at the mailbox.
I can't believe they're still at it. I just need to breathe. Who's watching us now?
Keep the music down. Of course. Sorry about that. Whatever. Hey, mind the music? Not with the dog. Not with the fence. Not with your peace.
Every afternoon.
They're at it again.
Always watching.
I've done nothing wrong.
That is the part people miss. Both sides usually have a story.
The first video was only 12 seconds long. A woman standing on her porch. A man across the street holding up his phone. No shouting, no sirens, nothing that looked dangerous. But then the comments started. Neighbors recognized the house. Someone posted another clip. Then someone else posted a photo. By the end of the week, half the block had picked a side. And the strangest part was this. Nobody was fighting over something big. It started with one complaint, one small problem, the kind people ignore until it follows them home every single day. Across America, neighborhood fights are getting harder to walk away from. A barking dog, a fence, a driveway, a tree branch, a camera pointed the wrong way, a car parked in the same spot too many times. On paper, these things sound minor, but when the problem lives next door, it does not stay minor. You hear it in the morning, you see it through the window, you pass it at the mailbox, you feel it when you pull into your own driveway, and your chest gets tight. That is why people are fighting back. Not always because they want drama. Sometimes because they feel ignored. Sometimes because they feel trapped. And sometimes because home no longer feels like the one place where they can finally breathe. But the full story is more complicated. Most neighborhood wars do not begin with screaming. They begin politely, a knock on the door, a careful text message, a note under a windshield wiper. Hey, would you mind keeping the music down? Could you move your car? Just wanted to ask about a fence. There is usually a moment early on when everything could still end. One apology, one small change, one person saying, I didn't realize it bothered you. But that moment is easy to miss because one neighbor thinks it is no big deal and the other neighbor has been living with it every single day. That is when the fight changes. It stops being about the dog. It stops being about the fence. It stops being about the parking spot. It becomes about respect. And once people feel disrespected inside their own home, they stop acting like neighbors. They start acting like opponents. In one quiet subdivision, the problem started with the tree. The tree had been there for decades. Big shade, thick branches, roots pushing through the lawn, leaves dropping all over the driveway next door. The newer homeowners asked if it could be trimmed. The neighbors said no. They said the tree was healthy. They said it had always been there. They said it meant something to them. So the newer homeowners trimmed only the branches hanging over their side. The next morning, the cut limbs were stacked neatly near the curb. To one family, it was yard work. To the other, it looked like an insult. And that was the beginning. A few days later, a camera appeared. Then brighter lights. Then complaints. Leaves were blown back across the property line. A trash bin was left too close. Someone's guests stepped onto the grass. Every tiny action started to feel intentional. Then a notebook appeared. Dates, times, photos. The tree was no longer a tree. It had become evidence. That is where neighborhood conflicts become dangerous in a quiet way. They turn ordinary life into surveillance. A garage's door opening late at night becomes a message. A lawnmower starting early on Saturday becomes revenge. A neighbor glancing over the fence becomes intimidation. A wave becomes sarcasm. The facts may still be small, but the meaning gets bigger. And once people start searching for a hidden meaning in everything, almost nothing feels innocent. Modern neighborhoods make this even easier. Everyone has tools now. Doorbell cameras, group chats, neighborhood apps, security lights, screenshots, public posts, city complaint portals. A generation ago, a dispute might have stayed between two houses. Now it can become content before breakfast. Someone posts a clip of a neighbor yelling. Someone else posts what happened 30 seconds before. And then the comments arrive. People who have never lived on that street start deciding who is crazy, who is entitled, who is dangerous, and who deserves to be exposed. But after the internet moves on, those neighbors are still there, still sharing the same curb, still taking out trash on the same night, still sleeping a few walls apart. That pressure does something to people. In another neighborhood, the fight was over parking. A family had 3 cars and the teenage son who had just started driving. One car often ended up parked in front of the neighbor's house. The street was public. Legally, they could park there, but legality did not matter to the man looking out his window every morning at a car he believed should not be there. At first, he left a note, then another. Then the notes got colder. Park in front of your own house. You're being inconsiderate. Last warning. The family ignored him, so he put cones along the curb. They moved the cones. He called parking enforcement. They kept parking there. Soon, the whole street knew about it. Not the family, not the man. The curb. That little strip of asphalt became the most important piece of land on the block. And that is the thing about these fights. They're almost never only about what they seem to be about. Barking is about control. Noise is about respect. A fence is about boundaries. A tree is about history. A camera is about trust. A rental house is about who belongs in the neighborhood and who is just passing through. People say, it's just a parking spot. But to the person living inside the conflict, it feels like losing a small battle every single day. And small losses stack up. Then the fight spreads. Our neighbors start hearing about it. Someone says, honestly, he's right. Someone else says, no, he's always been like that. A quiet street develops sides. People stop talking outside. Kids are told not to play near one house. Curtains close faster. Packages get picked up immediately. Nobody wants to be involved, but everybody adjusts. That is how 2 houses can change the mood of an entire block. Not with one explosion, with months of tension. Then come the rules. A city notice, an HOA letter, a fine, a police report, a legal threat. Now it is not just personal. Now there is a record. For some people, that record feels like protection. For others, it feels like war. Homeowners Association make this even sharper. Some people see them as protection. Trimmed lawns, clean streets, stable property values. Others see them as a tiny government with power over mailboxes, trash cans, holiday decorations, and the exact shade of paint on a front door. And when people believe rules are enforced unfairly, anger grows fast. One homeowner gets a warning for weeds, then notices someone else has weeds too. No warning. One person gets fined for a trailer in the driveway. Another person does the same thing and nothing happens. That is when the argument changes again. Now, people are not just mad at a neighbor, they're mad at the system. They print emails, they show up at meetings, they record conversations, they start group chats, they run for the board just to remove someone else from it. And the original issue gets smaller and smaller in the background. The weeds are not really the point anymore. The point is fairness. The point is power. The point is, why do they get away with it and I don't? This is the emotional engine behind so many neighborhood conflicts. People can tolerate inconvenience for a while. What they cannot tolerate is feeling powerless inside their own home. And right now, a lot of Americans already feel stretched. Housing costs are high, rent is high, insurance is high, food is expensive, people are working long hours and carrying stress they rarely talk about. So, when a neighbor blocks the driveway, throws another loud party, or ignores one more request, it can feel like the final insult in a life that already feels too tight. That does not excuse harassment. It does not excuse threats. It does not excuse cruelty. But it explains why one small conflict can suddenly carry the weight of everything else. The lawn is not just a lawn. The noise is not just noise. The car is not just a car. It becomes the place where a person finally says, I'm done being pushed around. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes the neighbor really is impossible. Sometimes the dog barks for hours. Sometimes the parties are constant. Sometimes a landlord collects rent and ignores the damage being done to everyone around the property. Sometimes a person is being bullied by someone who knows exactly how far they can go without technically breaking the law. In those cases, fighting back may be the only reason anyone pays attention. The photos matter, the recordings matter, the complaints matter, the hearing matters. The neighbor with a folder full of evidence may not be obsessive. They may be exhausted. They may have tried being kind first. They may have waited months for someone else to care. But there is another side. Fighting back can become a habit, then a routine, then an identity. Every morning, someone checks the cameras. Every sound gets logged. Every car door, every footstep, every porch light becomes part of the case. And slowly, the person next door stops being a person. They become the enemy. That is the twist in many of these stories. There's not always one villain. Sometimes there are two people who both believe they are defending themselves. One says, I just want to live my life. The other says, your life is making mine miserable. One says, they're harassing me. The other says, they force me to act. And when both sides feel like victims, punishment becomes easier than peace. Because punishment is clear. A fine, a warning, a court order, a post that gets attention. Peace is harder. Peace requires someone to stop before they feel fully vindicated. And most people do not want to stop when they still feel wronged. In one case, After months of complaints and angry messages, two neighbors finally ended up in mediation. Not a courtroom, not a dramatic showdown, just a small room, a table, and two people who could barely look at each other. One brought printed photos, the other brought emails. They both came ready to prove they were right. But as the mediator slowed the conversation down, the story changed. The barking dog belonged to a woman caring for her sick husband. She was overwhelmed, embarrassed, and avoiding the neighbor because she did not know what to say. The neighbor, who kept reporting her, had been sleeping only a few hours a night because of early work shifts. He thought she knew exactly what she was doing and simply did not care. For months, both of them had been living inside stories they built in silence. She thought he was cruel. He thought she was selfish. Neither story was complete. That is what makes neighborhood conflict so hard. The facts matter, but the feelings drive the fight. You can measure a fence line. You can record a barking dog. You can file a complaint. But how do you measure the feeling that your home is no longer yours? How do you measure dread when you see your neighbor outside? How do you measure the loss of peace? Most neighborhood conflicts end in one of four ways. Someone moves, someone gives up. A court, city, landlord, or HOA forces a decision, or the people involved finally get tired of living inside the fight. That last one sounds simple. It is not, because ending the fight can feel like letting the other person win. But sometimes peace does not come through a perfect apology. Sometimes it comes through something smaller. A fence gets adjusted. Quiet hours get respected. A camera gets moved. A tree gets trimmed by someone neutral. Or two neighbors simply stop feeding the fire. Less eye contact. Fewer comments. No more posts. No more notes. It is not friendship. It is not forgiveness. But on a street that has been tense for months, silence can feel like relief. Maybe that is the real reason people are fighting back. Not because Americans forgot how to be neighbors, but because home has become one of the last places people feel they can still defend. The problem is, defense can turn into destruction if nobody knows when to stop. The neighbor across the fence may be difficult. They may be inconsiderate. They may even be wrong, but they are still close enough to shape your everyday life. So the goal cannot always be victory. Sometimes the only real win is getting your peace back before the fight becomes the thing that destroys it. Because the most dangerous neighborhood conflicts do not begin with hatred. They begin with one small problem. A problem someone ignores. A problem someone else cannot stop feeling. And by the time the whole street notices, it is no longer just about the dog, the fence, the tree, or the car. It is about one question every neighborhood eventually has to answer. How close can people live to each other before peace becomes something they have to fight for?